Hey friends, it's Deb. Welcome back to Thriving Alcohol Free with Mocktail Mom. I am so excited. I'm always excited. But today in particular, you guys, we have the most special guest. Hadley Sorensen has written a book called The Dirty Truth on Social Drinking. I personally am not much of a reader. And if you guys could see this right now, all the pages that I have turned down, things that I have underlined, starred all over this book that she has written, this is a page turner, and a page turner, like literally you're going to turn the pages down and you're going to want to save so many of the things, Hadley, that you wrote in this book. Can I give you a proper introduction? Can I read your bio?
Yes, sure.
Would that be all right? Okay, here,
yes.
let's let everybody know so we all know who we're talking to. Okay, Hadley Sorensen is the mom of 3 boys, a lifelong runner. Oh, good for you. A writer. Her book, The Dirty Truth on Social Drinking, was released May 14th. Congratulations. Her first book. As an enthusiastic social drinker throughout her life, she always felt like her relationship with alcohol was problematic. It wasn't about how much or how often she drank. It was about how she felt when she did. Boy, I know our listeners can relate to that. I can as well. 2.5 years ago, she woke up with her last hangover, her heart screaming that sobriety was the right choice. She had no idea that a whole new beautiful life was about to unfold. And now she uses her social media platform to tell her story with the hope it reaches someone struggling as she was. Her goal is to help others realize that anyone can quit drinking at any time for any reason, and no rock bottom is required. Oh my gosh, I love that. Hadley's Instagram handle, you guys, make sure you're following her, is Hadley_Sorensen, SORENSEN. Did I spell that right? Yes. Okay, I just make sure I give the right Instagram handle. Okay, so everybody can follow along. You have a huge following. So, okay, welcome. How are you?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction and for having me here. I'm so excited.
Okay, this is phenomenal. Your book is so real. And as a former mommy wine culture, trophy winning drinker, right? I had my bell ring for wine, This is like what we were all thinking, that still voice, like telling, like, all of it. So I can't wait to hear your story. I can't wait for you to share your story, I should say. So.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
You froze for a sec. Okay, you're back.
Did I freeze? Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about, I know we want to talk about mommy wine culture. I want to talk about your book and, just the idea that you don't have to have, big quote unquote problem to walk away from drinking. So do you want to talk about mommy wine culture and how that played into your?
Yeah. So I started drinking when I was 14, and I hear that from so many people for some reason. Maybe it's our generation. I don't know what it was. That seems to be such a common age. And I was this incredibly socially awkward introvert, struggled to fit in, all of that. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, this is the ticket. This turns me into who I'm supposed to be. And so even though I felt like something was off with me and drinking from that very first time, I thought that I had to keep going. So I, dove headfirst into the college binge drinking scene. And when I graduated from college, I got married relatively soon out of college, and my husband had a 4-year-old son at the time. So I became a stepmom, immediately.
Wow.
Super young, super mommy wine culture was just starting. Social media wasn't even really a thing. But it was ooh, being a stepmom is hard. Have a glass of wine. And so all the same people who had been binge drinking in college were now sitting around in our cul-de-sac in suburbia. But it was different because we were wearing expensive clothes and we were drinking nice wine and we were,
Yeah, elevated. It was a different experience. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
we were fancy and sophisticated.
Quote unquote elevated. Right.
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 And so then once I had our 2 younger sons and social media was kind of picking up, and I left my really stressful job in the mortgage industry to stay home with them. And I ended up starting a fitness business, a fitness coaching business that was all social media driven. And I am not kidding you when I tell you that I built my entire online persona around being this fit mom, this marathon runner who loves good wine. And it was my whole shtick on social media. And it gives me a pit in my stomach, and I make myself share now on Instagram the cringy old posts I did to, as sort of education for the people who are still doing it out there. But everything was oh, isn't this funny? It's been a stressful day. My kids are driving me bonkers. I need wine. Like you said, you had the bell that said
Yep.
bring wine. I had the socks that said, if you can
Oh
read
yeah.
this, bring me a glass of wine. I had tea towels and mugs. One year for Christmas, my stepson got me a coffee mug that said, this might be wine. And I thought it was
It's so
so
funny.
cute and clever. And
Mm.
it was really sad. And I always felt like something was off, even, though I wasn't always a daily drinker. I wasn't, like
Mm.
you said in my intro, it wasn't about how much or how often, it was about how I felt when I did. But it was sort of like I was hiding behind this mommy wine persona, because if I'm making jokes about it on the internet, it's not a problem. I'm telling everybody how much I drink. It's not like I'm doing it in secret. It was this bizarre phenomenon. And I felt like it was so
Mm.
funny and relatable and clever, but it was really just sort of sad.
Now, right now, looking back, right, I still,
Yes.
and I had those socks. I
Yes.
I still have my bell. I need to post it because it's so true, right? We have so many. It was like a joke. It was like, oh, it's like this mug. It could be wine, and
Yeah.
inside we're crumbling. Did you think you were the only mom kind of struggling with?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. I thought I was totally alone, because I looked around and I thought that everyone else was drinking just like I drank. I wasn't doing anything out of the norm. And I would wake up after a Saturday night in the cul-de-sac with a hangover, and I felt like my world is imploding, and I slid into a depressive episode and my anxiety was off the charts. And everybody else seemed to just roll with it and move on. And it was like, am I somehow experiencing alcohol
Mm,
differently than everyone around me? Like, what
mm.
I thought I was the only one that felt this way.
It's even though I've been sober now 3.5 years, but to even hear you say it, it's reassuring again to me. As you know, I felt the same way. Like I felt the same way. Like, am I the crazy? Like, am I the only one? I thought I was. I thought I was the only one. So
It
it's
shows us
reassuring.
how sneaky alcohol
Mm,
is, that it that it not only sucks us in, but it makes us think that something is wrong with us.
mm. Very isolating. Very isolating. Okay, in your book, you shared some really, really hard things that you went through, and I know it was like kind of around the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I know that's when drinking for myself picked up for
Yeah.
so many of us, right? We were maybe, we were mommy wine culture and it picked up even more. Can you share about the hard things that you've gone through? I think it's
Yeah.
really, really, it's really impactful what you shared.
Crazy 2020. It was wild for all of us, right? I
Mm.
feel like nobody looks back and says, oh, that was a good year. Um, and so the way it sort of started, 2019, the very last month of 2019, my husband turned 50. Um, and I threw him this crazy 80s party, surprise party. He had no idea. And it was the single worst hangover experience of my life. I went into the night, as we so often did, saying, I'm not going to drink much tonight. I want to remember everything. I was always a blackout drinker. That was my thing, and Badly was my alter ego, and I hated her. And I always
Mm.
said, like, she was done, she was never coming back out. But we know that's not how it works. And so I went into the night saying I was going to be so good and so responsible. And then I woke up the next morning like, what the hell happened? And I was hungover for a week, physically at least, depressive episode, like all the things. I was miserable. So I
Mm.
took a break from drinking for that whole December, like most of January. Then I had a few drinks here and there, and I was like feeling very proud of myself. Like, I've done it. I've achieved moderation. I've cracked the code. I've figured it out. Like, this is what I've been working towards for,
Mm.
40 years. And then the pandemic hit. And at first I was fine, and I still wasn't really drinking much. And then I realized that the kids weren't going back to school. I realized that we were stuck at home. And I started opening a bottle of wine and having just one big old glass at 5 while I watched, remember, the daily press
Oh
conferences
yeah.
from the
I
White
forgot about
House.
those. Yes.
And
Yes.
I would be like, oh, so stressed, like the world is imploding. I need this glass of wine. And then a couple weeks in, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. And so we suddenly had to figure out how to navigate cancer treatment with two small kids during a pandemic when it was like, okay, we're going to have a compromised immune system. It's not like we can send the kids to the neighbor's house during daily radiation every day and then chemo every other week. It was like, how do we, do this?
Mm.
And then a week before he started chemo, he got laid off from work, which was like,
Oh
right?
my gosh.
I think I say in the book, I remember we were at our lake house and I walked down to the dock and I was like chugging White Claws as I paced back and forth on the dock and called my best friend to tell her that he'd been laid off. And I couldn't even believe it. And then my grandfather died, and then my in-laws got hit by this crazy like financial scam. It was just like it was almost to the point where we were kind of laughing about it. We were like, what else?
What else can happen? What else can
What else
happen?
can happen? So yeah, my drinking got more consistent than it ever had been before. It was like that glass or two of wine every day, sometimes more. People set up a meal train for us, when he was going through
Mm.
treatment, and they would bring a bottle of wine with the food. And I mean, my husband couldn't drink. It was only me, but I would, get him in bed. I would get the kids set up with a movie. And it was like, clearly I'm going to need to drink to get through this. And everyone would make the jokes, if I don't know how you're dealing with this, I would be an alcoholic.
Mm.
Because it's our go-to. It's how we handle stress.
Yep.
And that's it was sort of the tipping point for me.
Mm. Oh my gosh. Wow. Can you share about, okay, when you stopped drinking? Yeah.
Yeah,
Share how you broke up with, is rosé, right?
it was
Mine was
rosé.
mine was Chardonnay. You were rosé. Rosé all day was you.
Yes. Yeah, don't
Yeah.
worry. I also had that tank top.
Did you have a tank top? Okay,
I
good.
did. Rosé all day. Yeah, so that next in 2021 when the world like kind of started to open up again, we were finally able to, and he was done with treatment, he's cancer free, yay,
Mm.
everything is good now. So just to put that out
That's
there. And
wonderful. That's
so we
wonderful.
we started having friends coming to the lake house again and family, and it was so fun to see people. And
Yeah.
when people come to the lake house, it was like vacation for
Yeah.
them, right? So they wanted a vacation drink, and that's different than everyday drinking.
Yep.
And so we were like, well, we have to throw down with them. So I would maybe have, a glass or two of wine during the week, but then on the weekend we would have people there and we would just binge all weekend. It's like vacation drinking rules say that you can wake up and have a mimosa at 10 a.m. before you go out on the boat. And then you can have, White Claw with lunch, and you have to
Yep.
have a Corona in your hand when you're on the boat, that kind of stuff. So Sunday, Monday would roll around and I was like toxic. I felt
Mm.
awful.
Oh.
I'd be so hungover. I'd be anxious. I'd be depressed. And then it would be like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday before I would start to feel normal again.
Mm.
And then I'd start the whole cycle and over. And it was just like wash, rinse, repeat all summer. And there had been all these, like the 80s party was the first one. There had been lots of little events that I felt like kept nudging me closer. It wasn't out of the
Mm.
blue. Like I was finally sort of starting to consider that maybe something was going to need to change. And so a friend and I drank a couple bottles of rosé just sitting by the lake the night before. I fell asleep at like 8 o'clock, as one does after your day drinking.
Yep.
And I woke up at like 3 or 4 a.m. with the spins and the chills. And I was supposed to go for a long run that day. And so I was so mad at myself. And
Mm.
I was laying there and I was like, this is it. I felt like I was like filled with a knowing. I just like something has to change. This
Mm.
time felt different than all the others. And so I decided it was going to be my last hangover, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was going to do it. And that's what started all of this.
Filled with a knowing, right?
Yeah.
It was that little voice for so long,
Yes.
and then filled with a knowing. What did you talk about in the book? So, what did you envision being alcohol free would be for you? What did you envision this would be like?
Well, at first, kind of leading up to this point, I thought, like so many of us did, I have to do this, but it's going to suck.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Right? This is going to be a huge sacrifice. This,
Mm.
but I have to do it. But I quickly, I think, realized that that wasn't the case. It started to feel like, wait, maybe this wasn't a sacrifice. Maybe it was more like a gift or a second chance. Maybe it's not going to be, maybe all the things I thought would be bad about it are really going to be good. You start to feel like, you start to realize that you've been duped for so long, you know?
So true.
Yeah.
It's so true. Yeah. Yeah. What helped you get on your sober track? Were there, well, I know you talk about quit lit, which I didn't even know what that,
Yes.
I didn't even, had never heard that term before I became, I guess, sober. I don't
Yeah.
even think when I was sober curious, I knew the word
I don't
quit lit,
think
right?
when I was reading it, I don't think I would have called it that. I don't think
Yeah.
I knew
You're
what
just
it
like,
was, but
yeah, reading this book about educating myself on alcohol. Yeah.
yeah. So Quit Like a Woman was the first book that I read by Holly Whitaker. And to be fair, I think I had bought it earlier that summer and it had been sitting there like staring at me. And
Mm,
so that was one of the first things I said when I was in bed that morning with that last hangover. I was like, okay, I'm going to read that book that I bought.
wow.
I'm going to
Wow.
read that book and that'll be the first thing that I did. And it was so eye opening.
Mm,
I think that's when I started to really like look back on the mommy wine stuff and
mm,
think, ooh, what have I been doing? You know,
mm,
oh, you're kind of like embarrassed. And I started to realize that it was kind of like a feminist issue. Like there were so many more layers
mm,
to this that I had never considered. So then I read a ton of those books. I devoured them. And I found a community, right? I sort
that's
of
great.
leaned into the Instagram space. I early on started working with this app, this sobriety app out of Australia, and it was a really cool little community. It's not around anymore.
That's great.
Yeah, and then and tons of self care.
Mm.
I babied myself for a
Oh,
while, and I think it was what I needed. So yeah, I sort of designed my own little path, but it worked for me.
I love that. Okay, what special what little, how did you baby yourself? What are some of the self-care things that you did that you look back on and are glad that you did for yourself?
So nothing super glamorous, right? I
That's
don't think of
okay. I
self
think
care
same. I think of it like,
as
yeah, can be the littlest things. Yep.
like I slept a ton. Like I
Mm,
stopped waking up at 5 a.m. to go for runs and I slept in. I went to bed
wow.
early. I still exercise tons, but I listened to my body. So sometimes it was like, I need more rest days, which I'm typically not very good at. You know, as an endurance runner, I think it's also why I pushed through the drinking stuff for so long. Like I was used to like beating up my body and being able to just bounce back. But
Mm,
it was for me, self care too, is I'm a huge introvert. So I need lots of alone time.
mm.
So it was like finding ways to get alone time. It was reading, it was journaling, it was just that stuff that doesn't feel very glamorous,
But fills your
but
soul. Yeah.
fills your soul.
Yep. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's meeting my sister at the pool this summer.
Oh,
I've declared our summer of self care and building our businesses. We both have businesses, and it's like you have to feed your soul. You have to. And it can be taking a bath at night or whatever, just simple, sleeping
yeah,
in. I'm good at
yeah.
that. That I'm really good at, actually, Hadley.
Well, yeah, I am too now. I feel like I've gotten, I'm like, oh, no, I think my body's telling me I just need to sit on the couch and read this book.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's my kind of self care. Oh my gosh. Okay, so what led you to write your book, and who's okay? I feel like I don't want to ask you even who's this book for. This book's for everybody. So if you're thinking about alcohol and maybe your relationship with alcohol, this book is for you. I have a membership, and I'm gonna ask the ladies to read this book. It's so good,
Oh, thank
so
you.
fantastic. I really like. I mean, just I'm literally just open it up as we're sitting here talking. So page 51, just ask yourself these questions like, do you feel that alcohol is making your life worse, instead of better? Just, I like that you're just the curiosity, you're allowing the reader to really think through their relationship with alcohol. So what led you to write this book?
Well, I said that in the beginning I read all of these Quit Lit books and they were so powerful and they were such a big part of my journey, but I felt sort of a disconnect with them because I couldn't really relate. I didn't see myself in those stories. I saw parts of it, but they were more, there's all this debate about rock bottom but they were more your sort of stereotypical rock bottom stories than what I
Yep.
had.
Yep.
I fell very much into what we now sometimes refer to as the gray area. I didn't drink every day, even sometimes I went weeks or months. My story, I had a problem, but I was
Mm.
at a different spot on that alcohol use disorder spectrum, which is fine, right? We
Yep.
need stories from like every angle of that spectrum. And at the time, there weren't really any that were kind of coming at it from my perspective. Since then, now there's a few great books
Yep.
in that area. But I started to realize, because I was sharing little bits of my story on social media since I was already kind of out there, and
Mm.
I was amazed by how many people were saying, "Oh my gosh, me too, me too."
Mm.
And I thought, well, maybe I can be the one to tell the story from the gray area. I can share a story that people like me will relate to and be like, I see myself in that now. I didn't see myself in these other books. So I decided to just figure it out, and I went for it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How long did it take you to write your book?
I wrote for about a year. It took me about a
Really?
year to write. I said, I'm going to do
That's
all the
awesome.
writing first. I'm not going to figure out how to publish it because I feel like that will slow me down. Like
Smart.
I'll
Yep.
get wrapped up around the axle on that, and I'll stall. So I just finished, and I was a writer. This wasn't totally out of the blue, and
I
I
love
had been
it.
journaling a lot. So after about a year, I said, "Okay, I think I have this thing. Now I have to figure out how to get it out into the world."
I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you figured it out. It's
Thank
excellent.
you,
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
just, it's really moving, to hear we're just so lied to. Like you said, we were duped. We were duped, all of us, like into like, I mean, it's everywhere. It's in Target, not even just, you don't even have to walk down the wine aisle.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like at the end caps by the towels practically. I mean, it's just shoved down our throats that this is how we mom. This is how you're going to get through being a mom. And so to pull back the curtain, like you don't have to do this anymore. Okay, you shared a story in your book about you and your family were playing a game. What is it? Something Against Humanity. What's that game called? I'm so bad
oh,
at games. What is it?
well, so
What's it
Cards
called?
Against Humanity,
Cards
which
Against
is
Humanity.
like wildly inappropriate for kids, but there was like a kids version that was called Kids Against Maturity.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, okay. Can you share the story? Because I thought it was so sweet, and just how we can change how our kids see us and our drinking. Because I know I feel bad. I know my kids have memories of me drinking more than I intended to. And I would love for you to share that story because it's really beautiful how your kids saw you so differently after you had stopped drinking.
Oh, thanks. It was one of those moments where I was like,
Yeah. Yep.
I'm on the right path. So we're playing this game, and like it's like apples to apples or Cards Against Humanity, where I'm trying to remember exactly how it goes down with the cards. You have everybody has these answer cards, and the person who's it like reads a question or something, and you all put in your cards that you think they're going to find the funniest, right? And they read through them, and then they pick their favorite one. And one of the answer cards I have said, "Mom's red wine teeth." And I was like, oh, that's so cringy on so many levels when you think about it, because that means like mom's having red wine teeth are a big enough thing that they made it into this game. Um, and so it just, for whatever reason, I don't remember what the question was that he read, but it kind of fit. And so I was like, I'm going to put it in just to see what happens.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, maybe he'll think this is funny or whatever. And he was reading them, and he went through and he got to mine, and he was like, this one is stupid. It doesn't even make sense. Mom doesn't even drink red wine. And he like threw it and kept going. And I was like, oh, I thought I was going to get a point for that, but it was just one of those simple little moments where I thought, oh, this is now how they're going to remember.
They remember
The
that that you're not
Yeah.
the mommy red wine teeth.
How old are your kids? I think your kids are older than mine. How old were they
So
when you?
I have two girls. My oldest daughter's 22, and then my younger daughter is 16.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah. I mean, they bought me that bell ring for wine. It was a little Christmas, like a silly gift. Mom will
Yeah.
like, let's get this for mom. Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh,
Mm.
I love just that you're sharing that you don't have to be a problem drinker. You don't have to be a problem drinker to evaluate your relationship. And one of your chapters is called Booze Nation. I mean, we've just been lied to. And where do you live? You're in Virginia, is that right?
Yeah, I'm in the suburbs of DC, so I'm right
Okay,
outside of
okay. Because
Washington.
there's a great non-alcoholic bottle shop now called Generation NA up in Lafayette, Indiana. So
Oh,
so yeah, when I saw your chapter in here called Generation Booze, I was like, yes, and we're going from that uh, to a generation of NA. Okay, so what's
I
your
hope so.
friends' reaction? Like your in real life friends. What have they said about you not drinking, and how's that impacted your relationships?
My in real life friends all still drink,
Yep,
and I don't judge them for
of
that, and they
course,
don't judge me for
that's
not
great.
drinking. And it's been really kind of a beautiful thing. I hear horror stories, right? We all hear stories about people who were not supportive,
Mm,
and I feel blessed that I did not have that experience, but it still took time to figure it out.
mm.
I definitely, some of my friends were kind of like, oh, bummer, really?
Like you're not going to be fun anymore.
Because I loved drinking with you. Um, yeah, I mean, I was usually the drunkest one at the party, and I was funny to laugh at, and there was somebody to tell
Mm.
stories about, and all the things that I hated the next day um, probably made it fun for other people. But once they learned that this was important to me and I was happier and healthier and
Mm.
more functional, all the things that giving it up did for me, they've been so supportive. They've been my biggest cheerleaders on the book.
Oh, really?
Um, yes, I had this little kind of delayed book launch party last week, and it was
Oh,
this like
good.
it was this
Congratulations.
thank you. It was this perfect, like, looking around, it was like all my favorite people who've supported me through this from the very beginning, and they're all drinkers, but they were there buying non-alcoholic wine to take home. And
I
I mean,
love that.
it was a really cool moment.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Don't have to be a non-drinker to support someone who is a non-drinker. It's
Right.
okay. It's okay. It's like you can support your vegetarian friends, and still be having a burger. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I like
Yeah. Right. It's all okay. Um, okay, so I want to ask you before we go, I want to ask you when you're out and about, what do you drink? So you mentioned non-alcoholic wine. Are there certain things that you enjoy drinking? What do you kind of reach for now in your non-alcoholic endeavors?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me share that I have like an entire folder on Instagram of your recipes saved.
Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, well, good.
That I'm
I
trying
hope
to
you're
like work my
I
way
hope
through.
you're enjoying them.
Yes. But my go-to is always anything with ginger beer. I love ginger beer
So
and
do I.
lime and mint. So, like, I mean, I feel like you can do so much with it, and it's really simple. So around here, so many places have non-alcoholic or mocktail menus, but if they don't, I'm like, if you have a mule on your menu,
Yep.
I'm just, give me that without the booze. And they look at me like I'm crazy, and they still charge me $15 for it. But,
That's DC. In Kentucky, they charge you 5.
yeah. Oh. My husband's like, wait a second. I thought this was going to save us money.
Yeah, it does. It's so funny. I thought the same thing. I thought I was going to save so much money, but I've spent so much money on non-alcoholic, particularly wine. It's probably like the thing I reach for the most is the
Is
non-alcoholic
it? Is
wine.
that your
It
go-to?
is. I think because I was a wine drinker and I still enjoy to have a glass of wine or a bottle, but I don't. I don't want to have a hangover. So I do
Yeah.
love. I do love the wines.
There's
Yeah.
no negative.
Yeah, and I'm so boring. I mean, I usually stay with so many of the same things. Find what you like. Have you tried? Speaking of ginger beer, have you ever tried the hibiscus Q mixers? Hibiscus. It has sugar in it though. So I don't know if you're like no low sugar, but
No.
it's got a little peppery, a little spice to it.
Ooh.
It's so good, and you can mix it, with some
Okay.
sparkling water to kind of cut it a little bit. But it's
Yeah, I
delicious.
need
The
to try that.
Q mixers hibiscus is probably my favorite of the ginger beers. But anyway, Hadley, any advice before we go that you would like to share me with somebody who's kind of in
I,
that space? I mean, I
I
know
mean,
obviously read your book, grab the book.
yes,
Okay. Today's Prime
please.
Day, so wherever books can be found.
Yeah. Uh, my advice is, even if you have the slightest nudge, the slightest inkling that you need to re-examine your relationship with alcohol, take the time to do it. Take
Hmm.
the time to really think about it, work through it. Because don't just keep ignoring your intuition. If your intuition's trying to tell you something, it usually knows what it's talking about, right? So don't ignore it for as long as I did.
It's good. Really, really, really good advice. Yeah, really good advice. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for the year plus that you put into writing your book and for putting this out in the world. Your story is really, really inspiring. So
Thank
thank you.
you. Thank you for
Thank you.
having me. I'm honored.